So thank you, everyone. Over the next few minutes, I'm really going to share to you our journey on how we used content streaming as a tool to really engage our membership, ultimately attract new partners, and in the end, generate revenue for the association. Before I get into that a little bit, though, let me give you a little history on the Ontario Hospital Association. We're a member-driven association representing 140 hospitals in the province of Ontario. Those of you that know your Canadian geography, Ontario is the largest province in Canada. So we've got hospitals in urban centers where you'll find more of the teaching and community hospitals, right into the far north where you've got your rural, northern, and small hospitals who really benefit the most from content streaming. One of the core functions of OHA is education, and working with the education team, I actually had 4 benefits that were significant for us moving forward. We had a marketing department, so anytime we developed content, I didn't have to worry about the marketing aspect. That was handled by another area. Our IT department was very supportive, especially in the early stages when we didn't really have the infrastructure. They saw the possibilities and were very supportive in helping us get the server and everything we needed up and running. Content, there was no issue with content. The association puts on over 200 events a year. Our biggest challenge was not what content to put out, but to make sure we didn't compete with other products in terms of that content delivery. And then finally, we had a built-in registration system. And I'll talk more about how that worked for us in the long run, but it was beneficial for us. So I had this slide in here from an earlier presentation, but I really don't need to talk to this group about why. Everybody knows the benefits, but if you're trying to sell this to another association or to your senior management team, you just have to look at the current economy. You look at the data-driven society that we're in, the information age. If you can provide education for less, if you can eliminate travel dollars and allow people to be in their office, then you're going to succeed with content streaming. It'll also give you a competitive advantage over other potential competitors or other associations. There are really 3 buckets, though, that I look at it. You're either doing it to improve your brand, you're doing it to transfer knowledge, or you're doing it to generate revenue. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how our journey went. When we began streaming content, it was actually back around 2000, and it was actually pressure from our membership who were given video conference equipment to use for clinical purposes. Doctors were able to consult with patients on a local basis to specialty doctors in Toronto or to major urban centers. And so telemedicine was being introduced. Our hospital CEOs are saying, well, wait a second, we're only using this equipment 2-3 hours a day. OHA, can you not leverage this and deliver content through this model? So we were a very traditional association at the time, living on 2-day conferences and in-class courses. So the shift to this new technology was a bit of a leap for us, and we weren't sure whether it was the right decision. So we began with a series of pilots, and basically we rented equipment, we rented facilities, and we held events similar to this, but also streamed it out to our members. Over a quick period of time and a few events, we were actually able to build the case that, yeah, you know what, this is going to work, but we have 2 challenges. Number one, we don't have equipment and we don't have the funds to pay the cost to keep doing this with this particular model. So it's at that point that we were able to secure equipment actually through a video conference vendor in exchange for sponsorship of our annual convention. So back in about 2003, the distance learning department was created and began, and so did show sponsorship for our annual convention. So it was a bit of a win-win on 2 fronts. All I'm going to say about equipment today is that everything from your phone can stream now to, there's so much equipment out there. Just talk to our vendors in the exhibit hall. It almost comes back to the previous point. You don't need to buy 4K if your audience is only going to be able to watch it in 720p. So if you're looking to get equipment these days, look what's appropriate for your target audience and don't go crazy. On the flip side, though, I'm a strong believer in good production quality. You remember, your content is competing with everybody else in the industry. So if you've just got a talking head and slides, if you can do something to enhance that and make it more appealing to your audience, you're going to gain viewership and you're going to engage your participants a lot better. When we got our new equipment, we also were able to establish a budget, an equipment budget, and that is rather critical as you go forward. Things break, you want to upgrade, you want to be able to stay at least in the game as you move forward. So establishing a budget when you get equipment was also critical for us. Also, as we continued to grow, we needed to look at additional resources. So in the end, we only ended up with a team of 3 people, but I couldn't have produced the volume that we did originally with 1 person. So keep in mind that with growth comes other demands. So our initial purpose was knowledge transfer. And so at that stage, because it was new and because we were trying to get people used to this new delivery model, we weren't charging for our content. So everything was free. We would post it on our site and people would get the link and people could sign up and everything was being made available for free. And it worked quite well. And so how do you measure that? Well, analytics. I can't emphasize enough the importance of using good data to measure your successes and to promote yourself, especially if you want to continue to grow. So some of the things that we use to measure: registrations. So registrations actually gave us 2 key indicators. Number 1 was the content we're putting out of interest, so were people registering? Pretty simple. But the more important piece was it really popular? How many people were registering? Do we have the bandwidth or the capacity to be able to accommodate the number of people participating? So even though the events were free, registration was an important indicator to us moving forward. It's one thing, though, to do registration. It's another to then count the actual number of participants or unique links you have participate in an event. Because we were streaming everything for free, we would get typically 100 people register for the event, but on the day of the event, you would have 75 people actually sign in. Now, others would probably view the content later when it was archived, but the key indicator for us was during our live stream, what kind of pressure is there going to be in terms of our capacity? So knowing those actual numbers was important. The other piece that we noticed when we were video conferencing is we could see the far end, and we knew that there was not just one person in the room, there were multiple people. This is a tougher metric to measure because you're really relying on your participants to give you an honest feedback in terms of the number of people participating in the room, and it's also dependent on them sending that information back to you. We have no way of tracking that otherwise. But what we did discover over years is that it began close to kind of a one-to-one with webcasting, but by the time within the last few months, it was actually closer to 3-to-1 for us. So that we knew if 100 people registered, only 75 unique connections, pretty good odds that it was at least 2-to-1 to 3-to-1. So when you were then marketing that to people that may be interested in your services, you could give them a better estimation of how many people were actually watching their event. And then finally, the other piece that you're going to want to track is your revenue. Obviously, you're going to want to know what it costs you to do to produce an event and be able to make sure that you're running on a cost recovery at minimum basis in order to sustain your business. So these analytics are all great, and it's great to show your senior management team that yes, we're doing more events, and yes, participation rates are going through the roof and going up, and it's all good. But there's other metrics that you can measure too. And so just for example, a heat map of your event or of your archived events is very beneficial for your faculty or your speaker to say, hey, look, everybody seems to be going back to that one section. You may want to do another program on that content because it looks like they're not clear on that. Or, hey, you may be interested, Prof, to know that the students aren't watching your content until the day before your next lecture, so just FYI, or they're not watching it till 3 in the morning. It's just, if you can provide your presenters, your senior management team with more data, it'll help support your case. So things took off very well. We actually exceeded our capacity with video conferencing within the first couple years, and we had to shift to webcasting. So we invested in webcasting technology and pretty much never looked back after that. But as is the case when you shift into new technology and new expenses, you get some new challenges. So in the end, we were able to develop a full Chroma Key studio and 2 fully state-of-the-art conference rooms with built-in lecture capture and streaming capacity. But with higher demand and higher costs also became a new challenge. We could no longer give our content away for free. So we had to start charging, and we introduced a pay-per-access model. So our business model changed. We were now looking at moving to revenue generation. And so the reaction of our members at first was, what are you doing? How can you charge us for this? It's been free for years. But when we explained to them the number of programs we were putting out to them, the savings that they were getting for not having to travel, and the fact that we could be more responsive and continue to expand this service, they actually all bought into it very well. And we didn't receive very many complaints in the long run. It was still a much more feasible option for them. And so we were able to move forward with our new revenue generation, which technically was probably more a cost recovery solution than true revenue generation. What we didn't realize, though, is that word had got out. And so while we were doing a good job with the knowledge transfer, and we were now making some money and revenue for the association, within the industry, our brand was now being recognized as leaders in the delivery of healthcare information. And with that kind of recognition came people to our door wanting to use our services. So our Ministry of Health began to use us anytime they needed to make a major announcement or statement to the hospitals, would use our services. Other healthcare agencies were coming to us to use our services as well. Affiliated organizations such as we had Toshiba, IBM, Cisco, all want to be part of streaming to our members. In some cases, they wanted to co-brand with us. In some cases, we were able to use the Chroma Key Studio and completely brand it their products. Law firms also coming to us, wanting to show their expertise, using the platform as a brand promotion for their own law firm, but using that technology in their advantage. So lessons learned and things that you need to consider kind of going forward over the next few years. New API, features where you can add things like polling, things that you can do to further engage your audiences. And it becomes a little more challenging when you're doing live versus on demand, but polling is certainly a feature that helps engage people. Moderated live chats, and I emphasize moderated. If you just put up a chat session in a live event, it'll become your hotline for troubleshooting and event problems. It needs to be moderated. You need to ask specific questions about the content that's being delivered during the event. If it's not moderated, it won't be as effective. The other piece that I got looking into before I left was gamification. So how can we make this more exciting? How can you bring that type of philosophy into your streaming of content? I'm not sure what the answer is there, but I know that it is currently the buzz. The other piece that we learned was program length. And so I was at a conference last week, and they told me that the average clip should be about 2 minutes. Well, there was no way we were going to be able to reduce our program content down to 2 minutes. But we did shift from 90-minute webcasts down to 30-minute webcasts. And the actual number of viewers for that period and that stayed on for that length of time actually almost became 100%. They could sit through 30 minutes, no problem. 90 minutes, you'd see them trailing off or showing up late because they knew they had time to still catch the bulk of the presentation. So that 30-minute window worked really well, and we found that launching that at something like 8:30 in the morning till 9 was also very effective because people could watch it and then go about their day-to-day business. And so that time slot and that formula was working very well for us. We also looked at where you had a whole series, say a day worth of content, rather than try and put somebody through 7 hours of viewing, break it into a series. Say every Wednesday morning we're going to do, and maybe you can only do 90 minutes, but you can at least break it down into shorter bits. I think ultimately what you want to get into here is searchable data. When you can get to the point where people can type in what they're looking for into your stream and be able to go right to that in the archive and see that 2-minute clip, you will have great success with people engaging into your content. The big question I always get is in terms of cost. So what do you charge? How much do you charge? When should it be free? My only suggestion to you, if you're looking at setting up a pricing model, is to benchmark what is going on in your industry. See what your competition is doing. You want to be close to them, but you also want to consider, are you comparing apples to apples? If they're just doing the talking head and slides, and you're doing a far better production, well, maybe you can charge it a little bit more. Or maybe you can charge the same and get better value for your money and drive the people to your events versus theirs. The challenge is just looking at what's out there in the industry and what are your actual costs and what do you need to recoup. And finally then, when should it be free? Well, that's really a policy decision your organization needs to make, because there'll be one side of the house that says this should be free, this is need to know information. I just remind you that streaming does have a cost, and there is a cost for your resources, and there is a cost for keeping up to date in terms of your equipment. So if you can't recoup that some way through membership fees or something, then you really seriously need to consider how are you covering your costs to do business. So in summary, again, I suggest use your analytics, use your data, prove your point, brag, show what you can do. Use the right implementation strategy for your goals. If you waver between them, you're going to struggle and you're going to create a lot more headaches than you need. And again, as I mentioned to this group, the time is now. I don't need to convince this group, but for other associations, other people that are thinking of doing this, you're already a few years behind. You need to get doing it. Again, my name's Todd Hutchings. Pleasure speaking with you if you have any questions.
Round of applause for Todd. Great job.